Good afternoon. This is Courtney Britton with the Texas Wildlife Association. Thank you for joining us for Wildlife for Lunch. Today's topic is Managing for Wildlife as Your Primary Agricultural Use, an overview of the wildlife tax valuation. Our expert presenter is Linda Campbell of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's Program Director of Private Lands and Public Hunting. Wildlife for Lunch is made possible through funding provided by the San Antonio Livestock Exposition, Inc., and it's hosted by the Texas Wildlife Association and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. There are no CEUs offered for today's webinar, so you don't have to worry about filling out any CEU credit information at the end. But we will have a post-webinar survey that pops open in your browser. If you wouldn't mind giving us your feedback after today's presentation, we'd appreciate any advice and any tips and pointers and whatnot that you can give us. And with that, Linda, I'm going to go ahead and get your presentation brought up here and pass you the ball, so to speak.
All right. Thank you very much, Courtney. Appreciate opportunity to talk with you all today. And what I want to do is to kind of give you an overview of this option for landowners, both the law and the rules, and also go through some examples of how you as a landowner might choose to manage your land under this tax option. So I'll go ahead and get started. Just a little background, first of all. In 1995, Texas voters passed what was then called Proposition 11. It was a 62 to 38% margin. This amended Article 8 of Section 1D1 of the Texas Constitution to permit agricultural appraisal for open space land devoted to wildlife management. In 1995, the legislature followed up with that and enacted House Bill 1358 to amend the tax code to allow wildlife management as an agricultural use for lands qualified under 1D1. So in 2001, the legislature then enacted Bill 3123, amended the tax code to require TPWD, Parks and Wildlife Department, to develop and the comptroller to adopt rules guiding this implementation of the property tax valuation. So this helped kind of put the sideboards on what landowners and the appraisers were expected to do under this new law. So during 2002, staff of TPWD and the Comptroller's Office worked together to adopt rules and related guidelines. Between about 2002 and 2007, it became apparent that there were still some inconsistent issues that needed to be addressed and clarified. So in 2008, the TPWD and partners worked with the comptroller to amend the rules, mostly for clarity and to try to clear up some of the inconsistencies. So just to remind everybody about the legislative intent of these laws, it is under the Texas Administrative Code Rule 9.2001. It says to encourage the preservation of open space for wildlife management and conservation of the state's natural heritage in all areas of the state. The excerpt from the House Bill 3123 in 2001, a quote from that is to promote the preservation of open space land. So that was the intent, and that is what the voters felt, as I spoke before, quite a large margin was important to them. So rulemaking authority on tax code, the part of the tax code that we have is 23.521, and so we helped the comptroller develop the standards for determining if land qualifies for wildlife management appraisal, and then the comptroller adopted those standards by rule. So that's how it worked. It's important to note that the tax code does define wildlife management as the following: actively using land that at the time the wildlife management use began was appraised as qualified open space land in at least 3 of the following ways: to propagate a sustaining breeding, migrating, or wintering population of indigenous wild animals, indigenous meaning native wild animals, for human use, including food, medicine, or recreation. So that is how the term is defined in the tax code. Qualifications for I'm going to minimize my, hang on here, okay. Oops, we're not advancing. Okay, hang on just a minute. There we go. Sorry, little glitch. Qualifications for wildlife management use include the general standards for qualification. Property must be appraised as qualified open space land, first of all. Property must be actively managed to sustain breeding, migrating, or wintering population of indigenous wildlife. Wildlife management is for human use, including food and recreation. And finally, the owner implements 7 of 3 eligible management practices through appropriate management activities every year. So those are the general qualifications of how to use this option. In the rules, we have 7 practices, again, that are eligible, and these are the practices that are mentioned in the law. Habitat control is one, and I'll go through that, what those types of activities include. Erosion control, predator control, providing supplemental water, providing supplemental food, and providing supplemental shelter, and then census counts as well. So those are the 7 practices that landowners can choose from to implement activities on their land. Qualifications, again, there is a degree of intensity standard for these, and degree of intensity requirements apply to all open space land appraisals. The comptroller rules state that for the wildlife option, the guidelines developed by TPWD serve as the degree of intensity requirement for the ecoregion in which the land is located. So the comprehensive management guidelines are on our website, and I would refer you to those for the ecoregion in which your land lies. And then again, it also says, which I mentioned before, the landowner is the one who selects 3 of 7 wildlife management practices to implement in accordance with the landowner's goals for their property. Also, there is a primary use standard in the law, and this is important for properties managed for multiple uses, which most are. And so the primary use standard says the property is actively managed according to the wildlife management plan that the landowner develops. The management practices and activities are given priority over other uses of the property. And then thirdly, that secondary uses do not significantly or demonstrably interfere with wildlife management practices and activities. And so these secondary uses are not detrimental to the wildlife being managed. So those are some qualifications as well. In terms of the wildlife management plan, the rules do require a wildlife management plan for the property and list a number of items that must be included in the plan. It must list the owners, identify the property, and identify the current use of the property. Must also identify the owner's goals and objectives. And it must list the targeted species and the management practices and activities that the landowner chooses to implement that benefit that target species. So a little bit about wildlife management planning. I just want to talk a bit about the process of developing a wildlife management plan. First of all, I think most people understand that planning is a process and that it does require identification of goals. It requires collection of information, an application of the knowledge that you develop, and records and observations that allow you to learn as you go and adjust your actions accordingly. So all of these are pretty important in the planning process and in carrying out your plan. Some example goals might be, improve the habitats for native non-game species, for example. Restore or reestablish native wildlife habitats. Protect habitats for diversity of wildlife species. That's a goal of a lot of folks. They just want lots of diversity of wildlife on their place. increase existing native game populations, particularly if you're interested in hunting on your land, to focus on a particular game species, or increase quality of a native game population. So I guess the bottom line here is that you and your land are unique, so your goals should match the needs and desires of your family and the capability of your land to meet these goals and objectives. So what I would suggest here is to, I think the best way to go about this is if you're new at this, to analyze your situation first. For example, here's an example of what you need to consider. You know, if you're looking at X species, populations are probably limited by a lack of what? You know, you figure that out. Survival of X species that you're interested in might be limited by what? And so you kind of go through that kind of analysis to determine what your limiting factors are and what actions you might take to address these limiting factors to enable you to reach your goals. Another way to look at that is, you know, suppose you filled in the blanks there, and you would say something like, quail populations are probably limited by a lack of nesting cover. My husband and I manage land in the rolling plains. That was our situation when we acquired our land nearly 10 years ago. Survival of ground nesting birds is probably limited by competition for food from fire ants. That's just an example. But you fill in the blanks there and try to figure out what is your situation and what are your limiting factors. Another one might be something simple like overgrazing by livestock has decreased the quality of riparian habitats. And again, these are just examples, but this is the kind of thinking you need to kind of go through to figure out, you know, what are your limiting factors and how would you best address them. So a quick word about unrealistic goals. As you learn more about your property and the wildlife that inhabit it, you will understand how to set goals that are attainable from a biological standpoint. These are some examples of goals that might not fit the intent of the rules for one reason or another. Here's one, deer management on small acreage. It doesn't make as much sense because you don't have a large enough area to really affect the population. Managing for one black-cap vireo pair on 1,000 acres. I mean, what you would, if you have a rare species, one might want to do more and try to, you know, you would want to have more birds to begin with before you would want to put a lot of effort into manage the habitat for those birds. Managing for the Houston toad and the Trans-Pecos. Well, there's no habitat for the Houston toad and the Trans-Pecos. These are just, you know, kind of odd examples that you might think about. Managing for free-ranging axis deer. The law says it needs to be a native species, not exotics. Now, that doesn't mean you can't manage for exotics, and exotics need to be looked at, of course, but the primary target of your management should be a native species. That's what the law says. So the management activities or the practices are driven by the management objectives. To meet the objectives of restoring native wildlife habitats, for example, you might want to think about, you know, controlling introduced pasture grasses with some action. And so in doing so, you would meet the requirements for supplemental food or habitat management. You may want to establish warm season native grasses and forbs and to try to increase the diversity of your native vegetation. That might fit under supplemental cover or habitat management. So you see, it's just looking at your goals and practices and what you might choose to address your limitations. So for each management practice and activity, these are some questions that I think it would be good to ask yourself. What species are you targeting? How will your activities benefit that species? How will you implement your chosen activities? When will you do it? How often? These are all things that you could ask yourself in developing your plan. How much will be done or the acreage affected? That gets to intensity and how much will you do, and where on the property will the activity be conducted. And I highly suggest maps to help you with that, to help you document it and to help you remember where things were conducted. Time schedule. That's important too, because you want a plan that looks at you know, what you're going to do in each of the months and seasons, because these practices are seasonal. It makes a difference when you put them on the ground. So you look at a suggested timeline. Now, many landowners choose a 5-year plan. I think that's a good idea because you're thinking ahead. Some activities count for longer periods of time, mostly those kinds of activities where you have to construct something, pond construction and those sorts of things. But looking at the time frame is important, and how you will deal with each of these practices over time. Map of the property, again, I mentioned, very important. And it can be as simple as a hand-drawn map, or you can use any number of tools to devise electronic maps that you can easily update. I would recommend updating your map at least annually. And remember that your map is a tool for you as well, to keep in your mind what has been done where, and it also serves as a record for your tax appraiser. If they wish to understand what you've been doing, it's much easier to be able to show somebody visually. So I would suggest a good map is always useful. Here's an example of one, just you know, where you're putting things, what you're doing. So let me talk a little bit about wildlife management plans now. In the rules, it says a few things about wildlife management plans. It says that chief appraisers may accept, but they may not require, a wildlife management plan not completed on a TPWD form. Now, we have a form on our website that most people use. I think most appraisers like it because it's very consistent in they all look alike, basically, and so that would be what we would suggest. Now, they can accept a plan that's not on that form, but that form that we provide is perfectly good enough for you to use to submit your plan, along with the additional information that you may want to provide them. An appraisal district may require an annual report. That's in the rules. And so if your appraisal district does, then you need to, there's an annual report form also on our website that can be used for that purpose. And then a wildlife management property association, which again, this is more and more common as people work together, especially in areas where we have small acreages in the state, may file a single wildlife management plan or an annual report. However, all members, the rules say all members must implement their portion of the plan. They must implement, everybody has to play and do their part, and all members also must sign the annual report and the wildlife management plan. Now, there is a requirement in the law about minimum size of tracts that qualify for wildlife management appraisal. Please note that the minimum acreage applies only to lands that have been reduced in size from January 1st of the previous tax year. So if this is your case, you would need to check with your appraisal office to be sure that you understand the minimum use requirement. Again, the minimum use requirement has to do with ecological regions, and so it varies. The minimum acreage for the wildlife management qualification varies depending on where you are in the state. Generally, it is increases from east to west, in other words, smaller in the eastern part, larger in the west, and this, of course, has to do with rainfall patterns as they decrease from east to west. So our appraisal regions, just so you know, this is how it plays out from the map I just showed you previously. And so those are how they fit in your various regions. And again, on our website, we have guidance that is specific to each of these ecological regions. Back to the, as mentioned previously, wildlife management qualifications say it is for human use, which can include any of the following and more. So it can be either passive or active recreational use. And here are some examples. I mean, just watching wildlife is perfectly acceptable. Songbirds, people manage for all kinds of things that interest them. And again, that is your choice as a landowner to decide what is your goal and what is it that you want from your land. A little bit about target wildlife species. Again, this is something for the landowner to decide. And you need to know something about the species that you're interested in, what it takes for them to thrive on your land, what potential your land has to provide those habitat features that they need, and how you can enhance the habitat for your target species. So those are sort of the things you need to learn once you decide what it is you're most interested in. Again, here's our 7 practices that landowners can choose from. And so now what I'd like to do is go through each of them and give some examples of you know, what these activities that you can implement consist of. So the practice of habitat control includes grazing management, prescribed burning, range enhancement, or put another way, range seeding, brush management, management of riparian streams and creeks, management and enhancement, wetland development and enhancement, and habitat protection for species of concern. So let me go through some of these. First of all, grazing management. You know, people often view livestock as incompatible with wildlife management. However, sound grazing management can actually complement, and many times does, a good wildlife management program if the class of livestock is appropriate and the stocking rate is conservative. Grazing management, when properly applied, can be a very beneficial tool used to improve wildlife habitat. So the key here is to do it correctly and do it, you know, under conservative stocking rates. NRCS is a good source for this. They have stocking rate suggestions for every county and every site. And so looking at grazing management systems that maintain a good diversity of native grasses and forbs is also important. So looking at grazing management and how to do it properly is very important. And there is help out there if you need help in understanding how to do that. Prescribed burning, another excellent tool for many reasons. Most people need assistance with this. There are folks that you can get assistance, Parks and Wildlife Biologist, NRCS again. Prescribed burn associations are becoming much more frequent. These are groups of landowners that are banding together into an association to help each other with prescribed fire. So I would those of you who are interested in learning more about prescribed burning, learn if your land is anywhere near a prescribed burn association and how you might participate in that. And so looking at the training options for landowners is important. There are quite a few available. If you want to learn more about this tool, you have to know what you're doing. You have to have some experience. But it is an excellent tool. Range enhancement, this is looking at if you don't have the right seed sources, if you'd like to improve the native grasses and forbs on your land, you might consider planting them and putting them on there. Now, NRCS, again, is a great source for this, as is your local biologist, and offices of the Natural Resources Conservation Service do have great tools on what types of seeding rates are adapted for your county, your climate, your soils, and so I would suggest that they would be a good a good source, as would our local biologists in your county. Brush management. One thing to remember is the amount and arrangement of woody cover is critical to meeting the needs of a variety of species. And so, you know, a good grazing and burning program can reduce the need for brush management, but it still may be needed when a habitat has passed beyond a successional stage where these tools are effective. So brush removal can be a component of habitat management. However, we do know that woody cover is important to wildlife, so the amount and arrangement is real important. And I'll go through a few of these. Site selection is important. Where will you do the brush management? Select appropriate sites for clearing. Again, you know, brush management is something that you really sort of need your own brush management plan, you know, a separate, you know, a plan within a plan, so that you can see where you're going to do the work, why, what areas you want to avoid, for example. And so, you know, site selection, for example, in this, you want to look at choosing the most appropriate sites in an effort to maximize your vegetative response and to minimize soil erosion. You know, you have to stay away from steep slopes because you have complications there with erosion. Deeper soils and gently rolling terrain would be more suitable. A faster response, more return for the amount that you spend. And so all of these things, you know, where you put it, what species you're managing for, and how your brush management affects the overall landscape are some of the things that you would want to consider. Oops, let's see. I think I passed one. Hang on. I'm sorry. I'm going to back up. There we go. Sorry. Riparian management. Streams and creeks, everybody loves them. Very important. Very important for wildlife, and so basically taking care of these areas is real important, we feel, for, you know, making sure that you're taking good care of your land and water. And so the riparian zone is actually just defined, I suppose, as the band of vegetation that occurs adjacent to a stream, river, or intermittent draw where vegetation is strongly influenced by the presence of water. So healthy riparian areas are important because they provide important habitat for terrestrial wildlife, in addition to the aquatic species. And you know, trees and other vegetation that are shading these streams prevent the water from getting too hot. This is important for aquatic species. Stems and roots of riparian vegetation stabilize the soil, and so there's a lot of key ecological functions that contribute to these areas. So, so the functions of, again, I guess, you know, I pretty much covered that, but these are important ecological functions of a riparian area that if you're fortunate to have this on your land, it is a key wildlife corridor and very important for a lot of reasons. There are some good training opportunities, again, for learning how to manage your riparian area. The Nueces River Authority offers some great workshops, and I believe the intention is to try to expand that throughout the state. So again, just a couple more things on riparian areas. Vegetation is the key. Making the stream bank stable require a mix of vegetation with both fine roots and large roots. So learning how to look at a stream differently and learning how to remove things that are harmful by just figuring out what it is that is harming the function of the stream is really an interesting thing to do. And if you're a landowner with a riparian area, I would suggest looking into that more, because you'll look at streams differently with some training and some information on this. Wetland enhancement, again, if you is an option if you have the hydrology and soils to support wetland development. Wetland is a wildlife magnet. It is. So if you're in a part of the state that supports wetland development enhancement, this might be something you would want to try. Now, these practices, if you construct or do some of these things to enhance wetlands, these represent longer term type. They count for a longer period of time because they require a lot of input and a financial input as well. So, and maintenance. Habitat protection for species of concern. You know, loss of habitats is the main problem with rare species, and so the key here is to decide if you've got any of these species on your property and what their habitat needs are. And your biologist can help you identify rare plants and animals and suggest ways to maintain and enhance their habitat requirements along, you know, with the management of the other things you're doing. But again, this is just a matter of identifying and figuring out what it is these species need. Erosion control. If you have an erosion problem on your property, you will need to understand the basic causes and how to correct them. So removing the cause and reestablishing vegetation to hold the soil is what is often needed. Sometimes it's necessary to use structural measures to correct the problem. Sometimes vegetation. You know, grazing management, altering grazing management is all you need to do. So again, a great source for erosion control is your local office of the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Predator control is another practice, and they can include mammalian predators, snakes, fire ants, cowbirds. It's important to remember that predation is a natural process. It controls excessive populations, and it's essential in maintaining diverse wildlife populations. So, you know, the first thing, it's important to understand what is involved if you want to conduct this type of practice, and what, if any, effect it will have on your target species that you're managing for. So, again, you have to figure out if you tackle this, what are you doing for your target species? Is it going to help? And so that's the kind of decisions that you would want to go through to figure out if you can make a difference with predator control. So here's some examples of wildlife predators. I think everybody, you see the snake coming up to the bird feeder, and anyway, just some ideas of what we're talking about. Predation, the first thing you have to do, I guess, one of the first things you have to do is to identify if there is a problem, and if so, to what extent is it affecting the species that you're interested in. For example, some problem, low reproduction of the target species. Game cameras can maybe help you with that. And so identifying the problem is pretty important to figure out if enacting or if implementing this practice will help you solve the problem. Direct predation, just to let you know, consuming other wildlife species is the most detrimental effect. And you can see, you know, grabbing eggs and that sort of thing is examples of direct predation. Cowbird trapping is one way to control, is one practice under predator control, and it is a way to control brown-headed cowbirds, which are a nest predator of songbirds, including rare species like black-capped vireos, golden cheek warblers, and other songbirds. The cowbirds lay its eggs in other birds' nests, causing the host to abandon the nest and fail to raise its young. So, you know, this can be a problem, and has been shown to be successful in helping songbirds be more productive in their nest productivity. So TPWD has an online training for landowners wishing to learn more about cowbird trapping, and so I would suggest anybody interested, please go on to our website and learn about how to do this properly. So let's talk a bit about supplemental food, water, and cover. Again, it's very important to decide what factors are limiting in your habitat, so you know where to place your time and resources to correct the limiting factors. And so this is the proper way to think about supplemental food, water, and cover, is trying to figure out where your limiting factors are. So let's talk a bit about supplemental water. It can be lots of things, wells, troughs, and windmill overflow. Some of the things on this slide, spring development, water guzzlers are very popular in some areas. So there's lots of options for providing supplemental water, and what will work best for you depends on the species you are managing for, the land characteristics, such as your soils and slope, and the existing water sources. I mean, where do you have existing sources right now? And the materials that you have to work with. So I just wanted to, here's some examples. And people can get real creative with providing supplemental water, and I think that's great. You just need to think about the available to the animals of the interest that you're interested in, and how to make the water source sustainable. So those are the, two of the things that you'd want to think about. But these are all kind of examples: rain catchments, things that, guzzlers, and they can be homemade. Lots of them are homemade. Some are available for purchase as well. This is one on our ranch that we actually purchased. We're in sandy soils in Stonewall County, so we purchased this guzzler, we buried it, and we built a collection skirt to collect the runoff water around it. So you can buy these commercially, or you can make your own out of materials that you have at hand. But what the main things is to examine the potential sources of water, determine if man-made sources can be used, if they could be modified, and determine the flows, and where you would enhance the existing sources. For new sources, earthen tanks, retrofitting old wells, solar pumps, piping, those sorts of things is what you might think about when you're deciding on this. Marsh restoration, again, a little bit about, restoring a wetland. It counts as a practice for 10 years. It involves engineering assistance to be sure that it is designed for proper function. So those of you in areas that have the proper soils and the proper slope for collection of water, runoff water, might want to consider this practice. And there's a lot of assistance out there to help you with both deciding if it's technically feasible, and also I believe that there is still financial assistance out there to help landowners with this. Wildlife watering devices can be used to bring wildlife within viewing distance of your home. This is often what we suggest to folks, and it's very enjoyable. You can do this. You can do lots of things for birds and butterflies and insects and things that enable you to enjoy wildlife up close from where you live. Water site modification. This is going back to what I said before. You may already have existing water sources that you might want to look at for modifying for the target species. So you might want to look at overflow, ramping, and it's important to look at these design modifications for existing water sources to be sure that the targeted wildlife species get a safe and effective use of the water that you provide. In other words, it's within their reach, it's available, they won't get stuck, they'll be able to get out if they fall in, that sort of thing. So those are things that you would want to consider in modifying. You put, for example, in this slide it shows putting escape routes in some of these features that allow animals that to climb out if they get stuck in there. Supplemental food, when considering this, it's important to remember the limiting factor idea. Providing productive habitat that meets the needs of wildlife species is always the objective. Supplemental feeding is not a substitute for good habitat management. And so we want to make sure that people understand that first. However, supplemental feeding to help wildlife through stress periods can be an effective practice. Increasing the quantity and quality of naturally produced foods. That's one way to provide supplemental food. Soil disturbance through shallow disking. This can work very well in, particularly in sandy soils that will grow food-producing plants. And so it encourages early successional weeds to come up and provides feeding areas. Managing tame grass pastures and croplands, overseeding with legumes, leaving waste grain and stubble on the soil surface, conversion of non-native pastures to native. These are all ways to increase the food value of the native plants that are available. As far as artificial foods are concerned, here's some cautions about that. Artificial food should not be provided to the extent that it will increase the numbers of animals to a level higher than a native habitat can support. This will just get you in a bind. Artificial food should not contradict other management objectives. For example, if you see that your artificial feeding is just fattening up your predators and making them healthy and more able to reproduce, and yet you know, you're thinking of predator control as a practice, you need to look at that. So the two practices, you have to figure out you know, which one you want to really do. And artificial feeding can sometimes do that, attract the animals that you don't want there. A couple of things about artificial foods too. Food plots are great. A lot of people use that. Plant locally adapted annual or perennial forages at the critical times of the year. That's the most helpful nutritionally to wildlife. Late summer and late winter are often the critical periods. The species planted and the size, shape, and location and the percentage is all based on the target species. So you'll want to kind of understand that as far as you know, how much you should plant, what you should plant, and the arrangement is based on what you're trying to achieve with your target species. I think I pretty much covered this again, but attractants for hunting, such as baiting for corn, do not qualify for supplemental food. That's more a harvest control. I mean, what you're trying to do there is bring animals in so that you can control populations, and so that would fit during, you know, under the population control activity. Supplemental shelter, we'll talk about that just a little bit, and it is another practice that can be used to address limiting factors with regard to nesting and cover requirements. And these are the types of things that we're talking about with supplemental shelter: nest boxes, brush piles. When cover is limiting, these are especially helpful. Here's some nest boxes, and again, we've got some guidance in our guidelines on, you know, what types of birds will use the different types of nest boxes. But this is fun. Nest boxes are fun because you can learn a lot, and it increases your ability to observe the species that you're managing for. Brush piles and slash retention is another one. They serve a dual purpose. They can provide instant cover for wildlife, but they also, let's see, I missed that slide, I guess. Hang on. There we go. That's the one I want. They can provide instant cover, but they can also cage or shelter for growth and recruitment of desirable plants. For example, the skeleton of this juniper tree here, kind of turned upside down, is protecting a live oak underneath it. And the dead tree there on the right is allowing grass to grow up within it. So, you know, birds perch on it, they drop seed, they can protect young hackberry trees coming up. So there's some other, you know, good things that happen when you do this sort of work, both cover and to try to provide some protection for some of the more desirable plants. Fence line management is another one. Here in this example, a strip of native grasses and forbs are growing along a fence line and providing some needed screening and travel corridor cover. And so, you know, this doesn't happen. I mean, this is not needed in all cases, but in some cases it certainly would. How it depends on the context of where this is occurring. Hay and management, hay meadow and pasture and cropland management, the idea here is to increase the diversity of native plants and forbs that benefit a number of wildlife species, in particular, you know, songbirds and game birds. Half cutting trees and shrubs. Here's a technique that's used for mesquite mostly, and it's a way that you can provide low growing cover if it's lacking. This method, you kind of cut branches 3 or 4 feet off the ground about halfway through and let them fall over. And what this does is it doesn't kill the branch. The lower limbs remain alive for quite some time, and so it gives you a little, you know, brush pile that is available to wildlife. Maintaining natural cavities, that's another good thing to do. We have lots of cavity nesters as a pileated woodpecker here, but you know, when you can maintain these cavities and snags, do it because it will provide homes for cavity nesting birds in particular. As far as census is concerned, census counts are important to help you assess the trends in the wildlife species you are managing for. It helps you document your management successes and makes you a better observer and a better wildlife manager. So there's lots of ways to count critters, and these are just some of them, and I'll go through some rather quickly, but some of them are geared toward deer, but there's other census for birds, you know, for songbirds, for quail, and your TPWD biologist can help you learn these techniques and teach you how to do it. A couple of reasons why census counts are useful. It helps you to determine, you know, did you meet your objectives? Did you accomplish your goals? How do you need to adjust your plan? And examples include, you know, annual population estimates, harvest records, browse utilization, and I'll go through a couple of these types of techniques. But the main thing is, the bottom line is, you just want to figure out what it is you're trying to manage for, and is there a technique that you can do with the time you have and the resources you have to get some idea of the trends of these species. And I know that census can be sometimes a scary thing for landowners because they don't exactly know how to tackle it, but I assure you, you can be taught, and it will make you a better observer, and it will make you a better manager if you understand how to do it, and I think that many people will learn to enjoy it as well as an activity itself. Spotlight surveys, this is one of the most widely used techniques for counting deer, and it involves setting up a line through your property, looking at the amount of distance you can see at night, and then extrapolating that area into a deer density estimate. And so these are run about 3 times during the early fall. More is better. So again, this is a standard technique that you can be taught to get an idea of the trends of your deer on your property and population trends. Helicopter, there's another technique, more expensive, but you know, it has its limitations, just like other census techniques, but it is a good one for larger properties in particular, and it runs, I don't know, last figures I got was about $400 per hour for a small helicopter. But one of the advantages is helicopters can see exotics, predators, hogs, I mean quail sometimes also, so you can get some interesting census data if you take advantage of this. Again, accepted methodology and a trained observer is what is used on this. Browse surveys is another one. This is where you look at woody plants and the use of these woody plants by deer. You can be taught to look at that and to do a survey. That the main thing is you need to be able to recognize what a bite is, and we try to teach folks how to look at the percentage of bites on a particular species, particularly the species that we know are most desirable, and you can use that to determine if your deer density is about right, in line with the habitat. Game cameras, it's a relatively new technique, often used on smaller ranches. It's kind of similar to blind counts, you know, what you see at an instant in time on the camera. Cameras are good for, you put the cameras at feeders and water sites, generally speaking, and try to use this if you decide to use this technique. So you can get more information about this technique if you are, again, best for smaller ranches because of the amount of cameras that you've got to have gets expensive. But another thing on game cameras, if you just want to put game cameras out just to be able to look and identify bucks, it's great for scouting. We've used it for long years on our place, and so you know, game cameras have quite a lot of uses, including census. A couple other things. Sorry, I didn't click that. You can also learn a lot by keeping records of observation of over a number of years. For example, this is my bird book where I record what I've seen and when. Now, these are just incidental observations. We're absentee landowners. But one of our management goals was to restore productive grassland and reduce the brush. So the records over the years show that I am seeing more birds indicative of grassland habitats. So that tells me that what we've been doing with our habitat, the species are responding accordingly. So records kept year by year, taken together, can be real useful to you. Another technique that your biologist can help you with is the daylight deer, herd, and wildlife composition counts, nest box surveys, those sorts of things, if that's what you decide you want to do on the census. And so they can help you learn how to implement those. So a couple of things here on if you are currently in 1D1 ag and you want to make your primary use of your ag land wildlife, this is what I would suggest you do. First, consult with a biologist for ideas and assistance on what is possible. Submit your wildlife management plan on your TPWD form to your tax appraisal office between January 1 and April 30th. Has to be in by that point, by April 30th. And then finally, the forms, guidelines, and references are on the TPWD website. You just go to our main website and put /tax valuation, and that will get you to the page. That page also has the rules and the law, the tax code, and other things that you need to know to make sure that you understand this. And the guidelines again are up there by ecoregion that you can refer to. This is a picture of the form that you use, and again, it's more it's kind of a fill in the blank kind of form. We've got it in both Word and PDF. And so finally, some tips for landowners. Do your homework. Read, surf the web, talk to natural resource professionals. Keep good records and receipts of expenses. All agricultural operations require record keeping, and this is no different. So keep a logbook with the dates and accomplishments that you've put on the ground. Make sure your surveys and practices are well documented and organized, and show it on a map. And again, this is good for your appraiser, but it's also good for you because I don't know about you, but I cannot remember what we do if we don't document it with photos and dates. And so it's important to do that. Take before and after photos. I wish we had taken more before photos. We've got lots of after photos, but you forget about the before stuff. So make sure you do that, because that's a record of what you have accomplished. Use the appropriate forms provided on the website, and be familiar with the Texas Administrative Code and the statute, which is on our website, about this option. Other things to consider: keep up with the annual practices, update your written plan and revise it as you need to, turn in an annual report if that is required by your county. And again, you know, turn that in as if you need to revise it, that would go into your annual report, and keep copies of everything. Finally, good faith effort. The law does not require you to be successful, either in traditional agriculture or in wildlife management. But it does require that you meet certain criteria for each practice, and that you demonstrate that you've made a good faith effort to be successful. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. And then I'll end with the importance of, you know, the importance of this overall. These valuations help conserve agricultural lands and wildlife habitat. These valuations apply only to the land. That's important to remember. Homes, structures, and other things are taxed at market value. So this applies only to the land itself. Open space lands provide many environmental public benefits, such as clean water, wildlife habitat, and recreation. So this is the public good of this option for private land managers. And even with these valuations, Texas is losing a whole lot of ag land per year. So we want to keep as much as we can in open space for many reasons. And then finally, you know, we have to be aware that taxing ag lands at a high market value would likely force sales, because this is one way that we can keep people on the land and keep them managing their agricultural land. And wildlife valuations recognize the multiple uses of land, really, and we've offered, you know, landowners this choice, and I think that many people feel that we have a much richer wildlife landscape in Texas because of this option offered to landowners. So with that, there is my telephone number and email, and if I can, Courtney, I'm happy to try to answer some questions here, or if anybody wants to email me, I'll certainly do it that way as well. So.
Okay, great. Linda, thank you so much. We do have a few questions that have come in during the presentation. The first one was, can you give an example of a secondary use that is okay? This was at the very beginning of the presentation when you were talking about that secondary uses cannot be detrimental.
Well, livestock grazing. I mean, if you know, that's a very compatible use. Trying to think of something that would be more borderline secondary use. You know, I think any agricultural use it would be certainly secondary, but would be absolutely permissible as long as it doesn't, you know, completely rule out the fact that you're able to focus on wildlife. But you know, building a tennis complex, you know, may not work, or something of that nature, you know.
Okay, great. Our next question is, are there resources available, public or private, to help us do the analysis of the land?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Whoever said that. We have a biologist that's responsible for every county in Texas. On our website, you can go to our website and go to private lands, the private lands pages, and it will have a link to find your biologist. So you hit that link and you hit your county, and then a list of names pops up, and that is what I would suggest you do. You find the biologist that's responsible for your county, and call them and make an appointment for a site visit. Our guys are pretty busy, so you just have to be patient. But we try to get to everybody, and they're there to help you. It's a free service for us, a technical guidance service.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question is, do you know if the tax code specifically addresses small acreage, for example, a landowner with a 28-acre hunting property?
No, the tax code doesn't really address, individual uses, so to speak. It says that you have to be you have to be an agricultural valuation already before you can make wildlife your primary use. But I'm not, other than the addressing the wildlife use requirement, if the land has been reduced in size from the previous tax year, I am not aware of any other place where it addresses acreage or use.
Okay. One of our attendees would like to know what remedies exist when the appraisal district attempts to impose their own opinion on the law. For example, if they try to dictate how supplemental water is delivered.
Well, I think the main thing the landowner needs to do is be familiar with what the rules say. The rules, and that's why that's on there, because you can advocate for yourself and say, no, first of all, this is my choice, and then you can show them that you are delivering to the targeted species what you intend. Now, one way to do that is cameras. I mean, if I were being challenged on that, I would put up a camera and I would show, have pictures that shows what kinds of wildlife we're using that water structure. That would be one way to address it.
Okay. Our next question is about predators. Are wild hogs and raccoons and cutter ants considered predators?
Well, hogs are for sure. Raccoons too. I mean, again, those are critters that eat eggs and can get into, ground nesting bird nests and that sort of thing. So yeah. What was the other one? Cutter ants?
Yes.
Don't know much about cutter ants, so I can't unless I don't know. I better not say. I don't know.
Okay. Our next question is, where can I find the forms necessary to comply with the census activity log sheets with conclusions?
Census activity. This person might be talking about an individual county requirement. Census log sheets. I guess how I would answer that is that our biologists can provide you the correct forms and the correct methodology to do census counts of whatever you are trying to do, and I would use those formats if you and if you have something provided by somebody else on that, I would go with them, because I'm not aware of. I mean, we have some examples on our website on the guidelines of
right.
the census, but I'm not sure about forms, what they're talking about there.
Okay, that may be a question better directed towards an individual county biologist then.
I think so, yeah. Or they can get with me and I'll find out.
Okay. One of our attendees would like to know if these practices are tax deductible.
No. Let's see. I need to follow. The practices are tax deductible. In other words, if you buy food for wildlife, do you get? Do you have to pay sales tax? Is that what they're talking about, you think?
Most likely, yes.
I think the answer to that is no.
Okay, great. Another question is, has anyone thought of having a wildlife valuation share group or organization? This gentleman has had a wildlife valuation for 8 years and would like to share information. Do you know of any, you know, maybe, I don't know, Google share sites or anything like that, or is there a forum with TPWD where folks can get together to communicate?
That's a fabulous idea, actually. You know, I don't know. Whoever said that, if they'll email me, I'd like to explore that a little bit. You know, we use social media a lot. We don't have a way that, you know, that our manpower issues get us when we're talking about blogs and things of that nature on our website. But you know, having a place that can be shared would be a pretty cool idea. So yeah, I'd like to explore that further. I don't know of anything right now, other than what is, you know, people use social media to do normally.
Okay. And I believe you answered this one in the presentation, but just to clarify, do camera counts work for census counts? Do they qualify?
If done in the correct methodology, yeah. And okay. I say that because you have to have a certain number. You have to do it in a certain way, and you have to have a certain number of cameras out there. So,
okay. So again, maybe with the county biologist to be able to help direct those.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Excellent. One of our attendees would like to know, she comments that there are several consulting companies that offer to set this program up. She wants to know if this is difficult or if it's practical for a landowner to set it up and manage this program on their own.
Yeah, well, we've tried very hard to make sure that this is, we're providing this information so that people can do it on their own. Now, again, if I were new at it, I would want to get with my county biologist first and, you know, talk with them about the land. They know the county very well. If you can get them to come out and look at your property if you're available to do that, because that just sort of sets the stage for what is possible and what you need to look for. So with that initial help, I think, yes, I think landowners are certainly able to do it. They just have to put in the time to learn the information.
Okay, excellent. And can cattle grazing be a part of the plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said before, I mean, grazing can be a great tool, and it can be, if done properly, it can contribute to actually enhancing wildlife habitat.
Okay, great. And here's another question. Is there any county interpretation that can limit the size of property qualification if a property is currently under ag exemption?
In reading the rules, if the property is currently under the ag valuation and it has not changed, it has not been reduced in size from the previous tax year, then it is eligible to move to wildlife.
Okay, excellent. Let's see if we've got any more. Is there any hope that the state tax credit of purchases related to wildlife valuation, like the other AGS tax credit provides, that the state could move towards providing those for wildlife valuation like they do for ag valuation currently?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That's something that you know, we would need to, you know, look at as far as you know, I'm not real familiar with how the law works on that, and that's something that the comptroller's office could get involved in, and I would suggest you pose that to the comptroller's office.
Okay, and next question is, can you explain why you have to have an ag exemption prior to switching to wildlife, and do you think that there's any chance that landowners will be able to get a wildlife exemption without first having an ag exemption in the future? That
was part of the agreement when the law was passed, the way I understand it, that it had to be revenue neutral to the county, and so because of that, that is why you have to have the ag valuation first, and then they just enable people to switch their primary ag use to wildlife. But to make it revenue neutral to the county, they had to pass it. You know, to get it passed initially, it had to be revenue neutral to the county.
Okay, and this is kind of going back to our question earlier about predators. He's explaining that cutter ants are harvester ants, and they strip they strip leaves and vegetation. And could they be considered predators because of that?
Because of their effect on vegetation?
Yes.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Let's see. Someone here is suggesting, just for documentation purposes, that perhaps a LinkedIn group would work well for the sharing of information of folks who have experienced this. So I want to keep that in mind.
That is an interesting idea. I must say I'm not real active on LinkedIn. In fact, I'm not part of LinkedIn. I do some other social media stuff. But yeah, that's an interesting idea, but somebody that knows more about LinkedIn probably. But I'm happy to explore that idea with whoever wants to. Yes.
What is the tax rate difference between ag and wildlife valuations?
There would be no, in other words, if you are currently taxed at an ag valuation for whatever it is you're doing presently, and you switch to wildlife, there would be no difference in your taxes.
So
that's what they mean. It's
the agriculture valuation and the wildlife valuation tax rates are the same.
Yes, yes, yes. I believe that's right. Yes.
Okay, great. And what steps are needed to modify a wildlife management plan after a few years of experience?
I would just, get the form and change the date. That there's a place on the form at the date you say that this plan is good from 2012 to whatever 2014. Just revise it and make it a different time frame from 2014 to whatever 2020. We will do this and resubmit it to them. And I would accompany that with a letter and say this is a revised plan for our property. We have accomplished thus and thus. We have new goals now, or we want to expand on these goals, and just send it to them with a different time frame.
Excellent. Folks, it looks like that's pretty much wrapping up our questions. If you've got any other questions, please type them in and send it to all participants. We do have a note here from David Langford. Would like to remind all of us that this is not a tax exemption. It's a tax evaluation, and that is a really important point. Thank you. Thanks for reminding us. And
amen. Did I say that? Boy, if I said that, I'm in trouble. But yeah.
Well, hopefully we can all remember to call it evaluation and not an exemption, especially when talking with the public.
It is evaluation. That's correct. Absolutely. Yep.
And just one more note here says, since harvester ants are the primary food supply for horny toads, you may want to encourage rather than discourage them on your property if you're interested in that particular wildlife.
That's
another note there about the ants.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I failed to show I had a horned lizard in my little picture on my place, and yeah, I mean I don't see them often, but my goodness, I'd like to document that I have such a cool critter, so yeah.
Excellent. Well, Linda, I can't thank you enough for all your help today, your expertise, and your presentation on behalf of TWA and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We just really thank you for your support of this program. And
all right,
folks, we thank y'all for participating. We couldn't do this without you, and we encourage you to please fill in the survey that's going to pop up in your window when we close out today, so that you can give us your ideas and help us to improve our process as we go along. I also want to remind everyone that this webinar, like all the webinars, are recorded and available on the Texas Wildlife Association website at www.texas-wildlife.org. So after we get this one cleaned up, we'll have that one posted on there, and you can watch it anytime you want. And also that our next Wildlife for Lunch webinar will be on Thursday, February 21st, and Ricky Lennox of NRCS will be talking about plant ID for the outdoorsman. So it's going to be a great new topic that there's a lot of requests from the 2012 series to have something on plant identification, and so we've got one of our utmost experts to come in and do that.
That's going to be a good one. Yep.
Yeah, hopefully everybody can tune back in next month. Linda, thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for attending today.
Yeah, if anybody has follow-up questions, just please feel free to email or call me. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all.